Hi, this is the last of the three demos. In this one, I talk about the BEA, the Bureau of Economic Analysis. This is the one where we get the GDP. And I talked about GDP in the lecture, so I don't want to belabor the point. But basically, GDP is the the sum total of all the goods and services sold in the United States in a certain period. And it's typically talked about in terms of a quarterly basis. So what I want to talk about are some things you can do with data here. And again, all these sites really compel you to spend a lot of time going through the sites. Really, we could spend a whole semester on all these sites and really digging into everything that's available. But I want to just show you a couple of things about GDP on this site. So let's go here to data, and you can go by topic, by place, or by economic account. I want to go by place, interestingly enough, because I think this will help you out with your little bit of exercise this week. So it says United States gross domestic product. So it says over here, United States in the world, states and territories. But it also goes by industry, by consumer spending, by expenditure price, the EPI, in addition to the CPI, and then it talks about a lot of other kinds of topics. What I want to look at here, just to give you a little bit of demo, is states and territories. So GDP by state, consumer spending by state. I want to look at GDP by state. So here it is. You can see the little map there, and this talks about the percentage change in real GDP by state from the first quarter of 2018 to the second quarter of 2018. And it talks about the growth. So remember, I talked about in the lecture how typically you'll see things like 4.2. The GDP was 4.2. The GDP wasn't 4.2. The GDP is expressed actually in billions and trillions of dollars, but the GDP growth, as expressed as an annual percent growth, was that 4.2. So what economists are always looking for is growth in the economy or expansion in the economy. If the percentage varies from one quarter to the next, it's always going to vary by going up or down, right? So if we see an economy that's growing at 4% a year, that's an expanding economy. And a lot of economists will say we can't sustain a growth of 4.5% per year. Some people hope for that. But so typically you look at growth over time. What I want to look at here is just GDP by states. So here, how am I going to get there? So again, at the top of that, it says GDP by state. Let me scroll down a little bit. It has current releases, which are going to talk about the current quarters that's being reported on. I want to go down here to where it says interactive data. And this is pretty cool. So interactive data, GDP by state. So I'm going to click on that link there. And this is going to come up here with a lot of tables that I can select from. So quarterly GDP by state, annual GDP by state, GDP by metropolitan area, personal consumption by state, and so on. I'm going to select annual gross domestic product by state, and this is going to give me the chance to look at GDP. So I want to look at GDP in terms of current dollars, because the GDP actually is dollars. That is the sum total of all these dollars. And so, as you can imagine, because we have a very large economy, it takes a lot to sum all of this up. These are the industrial classifications in which they're grouped. This is the current one that has been used for the last 20 years. So just leave that as is, and I'm going to next step here. And now here, like the census, I see that I can get all kinds of different geographic places. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Nebraska, select Nebraska, go down here and hit next step. give this some time to process, and this is going to come up with a table, and it says either your session has expired or we're unable to get the data. So what happened here? Let me try that again. Let's try GDP by state. Go down to my interactive data. Click on GDP by state and GDP in current dollars. Again, I want to see what the Nebraska GDP is. All statistics in tables. Levels. Okay. So it has years here, and you're going to see something that I can do. So here's the GDP for Nebraska for 2017. So this is the all industry total. So you can see on this chart that it actually starts to break down the GDP in terms of industries, which is useful. So the all industry total, 119,587. That is the not $119,000. That's in millions. So it's $119,000,000, 587,000. So you'd add, in this case, because there's a decimal point, you'd add 5 zeros to this. It's $119 million for the GDP for 2017. But now I can modify my chart. And I said my time period was 2017. What if I selected more years? Came down here to that, hit my shift key and highlighted all of those. Hit refresh table there. And now we see that I can get the GDP across these years, 2013 through 2017. Now these all happen to be in nominal dollars. So if you're going to convert these to current year dollars, you would do the same thing we did in the other example. By using the CPI, you could actually convert these to some base year. But as we're on Nebraska, it would be interesting to know where the GDP is predominantly expressed in our state. We do have a large agriculture sector, but it's not the largest. As a matter of fact, manufacturing is larger than agriculture in our state, which might surprise some people. But in some, this is like a lot of states, you would see a split between a lot of things. Financing, insurance, real estate, rental, and leasing is higher than agriculture. So what you can derive from this for the private sector are the major drivers of our economy in the state of Nebraska. And then this gives you a basis of comparison with other states. Because, for example, what if I wanted to switch to Alaska? Let's see what happens if I switch to Alaska. You're probably going to guess what happens if I switch to Alaska. I'll come here to interactive data. I'm doing the same thing here that I did with Nebraska. I'm going to select Alaska. Now let's do the same thing. I want to select all these years again, so I'll hit the shift key, highlight all of those years. Now here's the GDP for Alaska. But look at the numbers for mining, quarrying, oil and gas extraction. They're very large. Um, and it appears that uh, the oil industry is a major driver of the Alaska economy, which you probably knew. But I just wanted to use the chart to demonstrate that this becomes very useful actually as we compare between states. Um, because the idea is that in the United States, a large country like the United States, there is the macro economy of the United States, but there are macro economies in each state as well. Um, so combine this demo with the demo I gave on CPI and the demo I gave on the census, and I actually believe you should be able to complete the little mini exercise that I gave you to do this week. So what I'd like you to do with that exercise is simply answer the questions and then comment on whether you think this was a useful learning experience in terms of doing a policy analysis. So that ends this demo. Thanks for your time.